A father saw his newborn son and ran without stopping until he reached the ends of the earth. What made him flee was not an illness or a defect, but that the boy was too different from any human. That moment is documented word for word in one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, found nearly 70 years ago. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd threw a stone into a cave in the Judean desert without any specific purpose. That stone broke something in the darkness, and upon entering to investigate, he found carefully sealed clay jars. What was inside those jars would forever change the way biblical history can be read. They were the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the most complete of the 7 originals began with the birth of Noah. That concealment was neither accidental nor the result of an editorial selection without intention behind it. It was a decision made by councils that reviewed one by one which texts would be included and which would be removed. The criterion for exclusion was not always authenticity. Sometimes it was the inconvenience of the recorded content. But it was not the birth of a man that this scroll described with such detail and such specific precision. What he was describing were 5 physical characteristics that completely separated Noah from any human being. And those 5 characteristics do not appear in any official translation or in any printed Bible in the world. The question is not whether that text exists, as it has been translated by universities on 3 different continents. The question is why those 5 specific characteristics disappeared from all official versions. And even more importantly, what it implies that someone has made the deliberate decision to remove them from circulation. Before reaching them, you need to understand who preserved that document and why they considered it irreplaceable. The Qumran community was a group of scribes who dedicated their entire existence to study and preservation. They did not copy just anything. They did not preserve texts out of curiosity or for their anticipated archaeological value. They only copied what they considered authentic and sufficiently vital to pass on to future generations. The selection standard was so rigorous that even very old texts could fail to meet the copy criteria. And yet, the Book of Enoch passed that criterion in Qumran, and it also passed the independent criterion in Ethiopia. 2 distinct institutions, 2 different continents, making the same decision without any contact between them. They selected each text with rigorous criteria, knowing that each copy required months of disciplined work. They chose to copy the Book of Enoch in multiple complete versions, just as they copied the books of the Pentateuch. And they were not the only ones. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved it in its official biblical canon for 15 centuries. 2 completely separate traditions with no contact between them made the same decision about the same text. That independent convergence is exactly the kind of confirmation that historians seriously need. The Book of Enoch, chapter 106, describes 5 physical traits of the newborn Noah with documentary precision. The apocryphal Genesis of Qumran confirms those same 5 characteristics using exactly the same words. This has a technical name in historical analysis: cross-documentary confirmation between independent sources. It is what distinguishes a verifiable historical account from a mythical narrative constructed without physical support. The Canonical Bible dedicates 2 phrases to describe Noah as a person, and both only say that he was a righteous man. 2 sentences, without any physical details, without information about their origin or the circumstances of their birth. But the apocryphal Genesis devotes its entire initial section to the birth of Noah with completely extraordinary detail. That difference between two sentences and an entire section is not editorial. It is a decision about what should be hidden. Someone read that stuff, understood what it described, and made the decision that it should not reach the general public. That selection process occurred in the early centuries of Christianity, when the canons were deliberately established. The texts of Qumran prove that what was removed existed before the selection process and was treated as sacred. What remained was what did not disturb too much, what described Noah as a righteous man and not as something different. Noah's father was named Lamech, and the text records that, upon seeing his newborn son, he recoiled in terror. What he saw in that cradle resembled nothing he had seen before, nor any human being he knew. The first documented characteristic of the child's skin was white as snow, and, at the same time, reddish like a flower. The Aramaic fragment from Qumran uses exactly that double description without variation between the two independent texts. In the context of the ancient Near East, that combination of colors did not correspond to any human phenotype. The second characteristic was that her hair was completely white from the very moment of her birth, without exception. The text lists it as a specific and observable physical trait, not as a poetic metaphor or a religious symbol. The white hair of a newborn has no biological explanation in any medical tradition of the ancient world. The third characteristic was that when the child opened their eyes for the first time, the entire room was completely illuminated. The father described that light as something that emanated directly from the newborn's eyes towards the walls. Not from an open window, not from any lit torch, but from the very eyes of that child. Lamech saw this and declared, according to the text of Qumran, "This is not a human child. This is something completely different." The apocryphal Genesis records that statement with exact precision, and it is this that triggers everything that follows. But the fourth and fifth characteristics are the ones that transform the complete meaning of the flood narrative. Fourth characteristic: at the exact moment the child left the midwife's arms, he spoke directly. He did not cry like any newborn. The text states that he spoke to the Lord of Justice at that very moment. The document is completely specific on that point. It spoke at the precise moment of birth, without any ambiguity. Not days after the birth, not weeks later, at that exact moment according to the Aramaic text of Qumran. The only text that records that moment with such precision was precisely the one that was removed from the official version. The fifth characteristic was the one that made Lamech leave the house and run without stopping to the ends. Not the eyes that filled the room with light, not the white hair since birth. The fifth was something more total. The Book of Enoch describes it in a single sentence that encapsulates the entire weight of the narrative without any literary embellishment. Its shape and type are neither like that of a man nor like that of the sons of heaven, says the text. Not a single isolated physical trait, nor a specific peculiarity, but its entire form, its complete type, declared non-human. 5 documented characteristics in 2 distinct texts that did not depend on each other for existence. And those 2 texts were found separately, preserved by different traditions in different periods. That both say the same thing with the same words is neither a replica nor a copy. It is a parallel memory of the same reality. 2 separate traditions, 2 distinct historical periods, exactly the same details with no variation between them. That convergence is not a textual coincidence. It is the confirmation that both texts recall something that happened. That is the level of documentary evidence surrounding the birth of Noah in the documents found at Qumran. Now consider what it means that those 5 traits have been preserved so precisely for 20 centuries. It means that someone considered that information vital enough to copy it exactly without altering it. And it means that this information had a function far beyond the simple recording of a singular birth. Lamech didn't know what to do with what he had seen that night, so he ran out to find his great-grandfather. That great-grandfather was named Enoch, and he lived in seclusion in a place that the text describes as the ends of the earth. Lamech did not ask what name to give the child, or what future he expected for this being so different from all others. She asked him a single question, direct and completely terrified. Is this child mine, or is it from the beings of heaven? That question from a father about his own newborn son opens the first section of the complete apocryphal Genesis. The most complete scroll of the 7 original Dead Sea Scrolls begins exactly with that question, without answering it. And before Enoch could respond, the text records something that almost no teacher or preacher has ever mentioned. Noah's mother, named Bitonosh in the Hebrew text, had to defend her personal fidelity before Lamech there. He did not believe that the child was his, because that newborn did not resemble any known human being at all. The apocryphal Genesis records its complete defense word for word, with a specificity that does not correspond to the myth. That intimate and domestic detail is one of the strongest indicators that the text describes something real and concrete. It is a moment of family tension, documented on a leather scroll over 2,000 years old, found in Judea. No one invents that scene in a sacred text unless that scene is part of what really happened. Sacred texts do not include details of marital tension without reason. That is not the language of allegory. The presence of Bitonosh defending her fidelity is the most human and real detail of the entire apocryphal Genesis. And that detail was preserved for 2,000 years in the desert, while the official version only said that Noah was righteous. That difference between both texts is not one of interpretation, but of deliberate selection of what people can know. Then Enoch answered Lamech, and what he answered is precisely the part that has been removed from modern translations. It was not removed from the apocryphal Genesis or the Book of Enoch. Both preserve it intact and without any alteration. It was removed from the versions that institutions distributed as definitive and complete for centuries. Enoch did not respond with a yes or a no because the answer required a broader and more precise context first. He first explained to Lamech what he had already seen in a vision, that this child would have a specific role in what was to come. Enoch's response was not an emotional consolation for a frightened father, but an explanation of the child's role. He told you that the boy you saw tonight will survive what is coming, and what is coming will purify the entire earth. However, the reason for their choice was neither their extraordinary appearance nor their non-human physical characteristics. The reason was a single Hebrew word that Moses inserted in Genesis 6-9, and that almost no one has explained correctly. That word is Toledoth, and in Spanish it is generally translated as generations, losing its essential meaning. Toledoth in ancient Hebrew does not mean family lineage or genealogy in the conventional and simple sense. It signifies the complete integrity of the origin, the uncontaminated purity of the source from which a being proceeds. When Moses wrote that Noah was perfect in his generations, he was not describing his religious behavior. He was describing his biological origin and what set him apart from all his contemporaries at that exact moment. That difference was the intact Toledoth, His lineage had not been altered by the pattern that Enoch records in detail. The pattern that Enoch describes is in Genesis 6-4, and Moses inserted two decisive words into that verse. Those words in Hebrew are Vegam achare ken, which in Spanish literally means, and also after that. The verse speaks of the beings that united with the daughters of men, and adds that this happened before and after. Before the flood, and also after the flood, the same pattern operating in two periods separated by water. That means the flood did not end the problem that caused it, it only temporarily interrupted its progress. And if the flood did not eliminate the pattern but only interrupted it, the question of its continuation is urgent. Genesis 6-4 mentions the Nephilim, described as heroes of antiquity and men of great historical renown. But the original expression is not just Nephilim, it is Nephilim ben Elohim, and that distinction of origin changes everything. Sumerian texts describe the Apkallu with the same 5 characteristics as in the Book of Enoch, chapter 106. No similar characteristics or analogous traits, the same 5, with the same combinations and in the same order. Egyptian texts speak of the Shemsu Hor, the predecessors of the pharaohs, with similar physical descriptions. Luminous body, light hair, presence that brightens the surroundings, the same elements in a completely different culture. The archaic Greek texts describe the luminous titans with traits that correspond exactly to the pattern of Enoch. 3 separate civilizations with no verified contact routes during their foundational periods, describing the same thing. Not the same symbolic archetype, but the same 5 concrete physical characteristics in cultures that did not come into contact. That intercultural repetition cannot be explained as a cultural borrowing because the foundational dates do not allow it. And it cannot be explained as a universal psychological archetype because archetypes do not produce identical physical details. The only explanation that encompasses the 3 corpuses without internal contradiction is that they all remembered the same reality. And if the 3 remembered the same thing, then the pattern is not regional mythology, but a documented historical phenomenon. It is not a coincidence that the 3 most advanced civilizations of antiquity shared that same memory. Sumeria, Egypt, and Greece are the 3 foundational pillars of Western civilization as we know it today. And the 3 independently recorded the presence of beings with the 5 characteristics of Enoch chapter 106. This makes that pattern one of the most consistent and least debated pieces of data in all of ancient history. Now we need to understand why this narrative matters beyond comparative analysis and historical study. Jesus in Matthew 24 specifically used the days of Noah as a direct reference to indicate a future pattern. He did not use it as an example of extreme immorality or as a metaphor for general collective religious disobedience. He said that in those days people ate, drank, and got married, completely oblivious to what was happening around them. That description is not of visible evil or massive violence. It is of absolute normality over an invisible pattern. Exactly like Noah's contemporaries, who lived their lives without recognizing the pattern that Noah clearly saw. Jesus was not describing an era of obvious chaos for everyone, but rather an era where the pattern acts without being recognized. And that is the teaching that connects the 3 texts separated by centuries, all pointing to the same pattern with precision. That connection was not invented by modern theologians. It is written in the 3 texts in their original forms. Anyone who reads the 3 texts in parallel without institutional filters reaches the same conclusion. The pattern that Enoch describes in chapter 106, which Moses encodes in Genesis 6, and which Jesus points out in Matthew 24. Enoch described it in the apocryphal text. Moses codified it in the Pentateuch. Jesus mentioned it in the Gospels. Three voices unaware of each other, separated by complete centuries, describing the same pattern with equal precision. And the three not only agree on identifying the pattern, but also on clearly describing what the response should be. The answer is not to fight the pattern with physical force, nor is it to flee as Lamech fled from his own son. Moses, in Deuteronomy 31-6, used a Hebrew word that encapsulates that response in its fullest meaning. The word is Chazak, and in modern translations it simply appears as "be strong," losing all its depth. Chazak in ancient Hebrew means to firmly and actively cling to what you know is true when the pattern acts. It is not an instruction of muscular strength or emotional resilience in the face of visible adverse circumstances. It means maintaining the perception intact when the social environment has stopped seeing what the pattern is doing. It is not physical bravery in the face of a visible danger. It is cognitive steadfastness in the face of a process that operates without being seen by everyone. Noah had that Chazak, that perceptive firmness that allowed him to see the pattern that his contemporaries did not recognize. His intact Toledoth was not only biological, but also perceptual. Its unaltered source allowed him to see clearly. Noah's generation was no more wicked than others. It was a generation that had lost the ability to recognize. I had lost the Toledoth, the perceptual integrity that allows one to distinguish the pattern when it operates silently. And when a generation loses the ability to distinguish that pattern, the pattern can act without resistance. Therefore, the flood was not a punishment for immorality, but a response to a contamination of a different nature. A contamination that Moses codified in the Toledoth, and that Enoch described in the 5 characteristics of Noah. That pollution was not visible to Noah's contemporaries, and that is why they continued eating, drinking, and marrying. And Jesus, after using the days of Noah as a direct prophetic reference, added an instruction in a single word. That Greek word is Gregorio, and it does not simply mean to be awake in a physical sense, or to remain active. Gregorio means to remain in a state of active perceptual alertness, focused on recognizing the pattern when it reappears. Not when the danger is already evident to everyone, not when the chaos is visible before, when it still seems like normality. Just like in the days of Noah, when everyone lived their daily lives while the pattern progressed unnoticed. 3 sources separated by 3,000 years of human history, giving the same instruction about the same central pattern. The Chazak of Moses and the Gregorio of Jesus are the same instruction in 2 languages separated by 1,000 years of history. 2 different words, 2 different eras, a single principle: to keep perception active when the pattern operates. That instruction becomes operational only if you first recognize that there is a pattern that may not be visible to everyone. And the pattern is only recognizable if you know the 5 characteristics that Enoch documented in chapter 106 of the book. That is why the scribes of Qumran copied that specific chapter so carefully, along with the rest of the Book of Enoch. That is why the Ethiopian Church kept it in its canon, while others removed it from their official and definitive versions. They knew that gregariousness cannot be practiced without knowing exactly what one should be paying attention to. And what we need to look at are exactly the 5 characteristics that were described at the birth of Noah 20 centuries ago. Noah's birth, with its 5 characteristics, was not recorded as the anecdote of an extraordinary baby. It is the foundational document that explains why the flood occurred and why the problem did not end with the waters. That document was preserved for 2,000 years, sealed in clay in the caves of the Judean desert. The Ethiopian Church kept it in its official canon, and the scribes of Qumran copied it in multiple versions. Two independent traditions, without coordination between them, made the same decision. This information cannot be lost. Not as historical curiosity, but as functional information for a specific moment that those preservers anticipated. That anticipation is not speculation. It is implicit in the extreme care with which each roll was sealed and protected. What is considered a curiosity is not sealed in clay. What is considered vital for the one who finds it is sealed. The Bedouin shepherd who threw that stone in 1947 did not know he was opening access to 2,000 years of transmission. But those who sealed those jars did know that someone would come, and they preserved the text exactly for that moment. The apocryphal Genesis opens with the terrified question of a father: is this child mine, or is he one of the beings from heaven? The 5 characteristics of Noah, the intact Toledoth, the Chazak, and the Gregorio, converge at the exact same point. Everything points to the place that Enoch had already seen in a vision, long before Lamech came to seek him with his question. Noah was not chosen because he was the most obedient, or because he built the strongest and most solid vessel. He was chosen because in the midst of a generation that did not see the pattern, he still recognized it with absolute clarity. That capacity for recognition, that intact Toledoth in its complete perception, is what the 3 texts convey. And the 3 convey it because at some point that pattern that Moses encoded in 2 words would be reactivated. Moses' 2 words, Vegam Achare Ken, are the most silent warning of the entire known biblical corpus. They mean that the problem that caused the flood did not end with the waters, but continued to advance after them. Through Sumeria with the Apkallu, from Egypt with the Shemsu Hor, from Greece with their titans of radiant light. Always the same physical markers, always the same 5 characteristics that Enoch recorded at Noah's birth. There is no alternative explanation that withstands analysis when the 3 textual corpora are placed side by side. It is not cultural borrowing because the contact routes did not exist in the foundational periods verified by archaeology. It is not a universal archetype because archetypes do not produce identical physical descriptions in cultures that have no contact with each other. The only explanation that does not create internal contradiction is that the 3 civilizations remembered the same real event. And if they remembered the same event, Moses' 2 words in Genesis 6-4 are not speculative theology, they are history. And if Jesus, in Matthew 24, pointed to that specific historical pattern, the question that remains is not just academic. The question is whether those markers, those 5 physical characteristics, that different Toledoth, are recognizable today. Enoch saw it in vision before it happened. Moses codified it precisely. Jesus referred to it as a prophetic reference. And the 3 said the same thing without knowing each other. Do not flee like Lamech fled. Recognize the pattern when it is active in front of you. Lamech fled from his son because what he saw in that cradle completely surpassed his ability to understand at that moment. The truth before their eyes was that this angelic-looking child was the visible answer to massive contamination. The flood was not the story of a humanity destroyed by general wickedness and then replaced by a single family. It was the story of a specific lineage, preserved because its Toledoth had remained unaltered in the face of the active pattern. 2,000 years later, that information is available for anyone who wants to read the texts in their complete original form. The texts do not ask whether the pattern existed in the past. The three corpora confirm that it existed and that it was documented. The texts ask whether the instructions of the three, Chazak and Gregorio, and the warning of Enoch are being applied. The difference between Lamech and Noah was not one of strength or social position. It was solely a difference of perception. One fled from what he could not understand. The other recognized the pattern and acted from that understanding with total precision. Noah was perfect in his Toledoth, amidst a generation that had lost it, and that Toledoth was what saved him. The man who fled from his own son that night was the first to see, without being able to understand what Enoch already knew. What Lamech saw in that cradle was the physical confirmation that the pattern had reached a point of total saturation. And the response to that saturation point was not punishment as the objective, but the preservation of what remained intact. What the Ark preserved was not just a family, it was the Toledoth, the untainted source from which to begin anew. That is what the apocryphal Genesis, the Book of Enoch, and the account in Matthew 24 are conveying together at the same time. Three texts that read like separate documents, but form a single argument when read in parallel. An argument about a pattern, about how to recognize it, and about what makes some people see it and others not see it. The answer lies in the Toledoth, in the Chazak, and in the Gregorio, three words that point to the same capacity. If this reading changed your way of understanding the text of Genesis, subscribe to discover the silenced texts.